Well, despite the controversy over the Russia probe and the firing of FBI Director James Comey, Syria apparently at the top of the agenda this week when President Trump and his Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, met face-to-face with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. The meeting was closed to American media, but as VOA White House correspondent Pete Heinlein reports, the discussion touched on a number of issues as well as global hotspots.
And I think that we're going to do very well with respect to Syria. I think things are happening that are really, really, really positive. We're going to stop the killing and the death.
Trump gave no details, but later Lavrov offered a hopeful assessment of the talks.
Подробно говорили о Сирии, в том числе в контексте.
We discussed Syria in great detail in the context of the ideas that have been put forth regarding the setup of de-escalation areas. It will be a step to contribute to the settlement of humanitarian problems.
A short White House statement said the president underscored the need for Russia to do more to resolve the conflicts in Syria and Ukraine. The positive tone cannot hide the difficult overall state of Moscow-Washington ties, according to Russia expert Stephen Pfeiffer.
On Syria, it appears that there's still some fairly major differences, with the White House saying that the president asked Mr. Lavrov to rein in Assad, the head of Syria, and also to rein in Iran and Iranian proxies. And my guess is that's not going to be something that the Russians are going to be inclined to deliver on.
And for the latest now on what's turned out to be a very busy week for the White House, as well as the country's top diplomat, I'm joined here in Washington by VOA White House correspondent Pete Heinlein, who filed that report for us, and on Skype, all the way from Fairbanks, Alaska, our State Department correspondent Cindy Saine. Thanks for getting up so early, Cindy, and I thank you both for joining us. Pete, so obviously on the surface, it looks like Syria was the big topic of discussion, but between you and I, do you think the Russians and the president spoke about the firing of Comey and the Russia probe?
I don't know how much they spoke about it, but afterward, when the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov met with reporters, that was what all the questions were about. He talked about how this story, in their estimation, is fake news. And if you read the Russian press, boy, they're chiding.
They're really taking that line seriously,
press.
right?
Well, they are making fun of.
Speaking of making fun, I heard Lavrov make a joke about the firing of Comey. He expressed some incredulity that it actually happened.
Yeah, he says, "Oh, this is a bunch of fake information," and you know, he when asked about it by a reporter as he was going in with Tillerson, he said, "Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Did that really happen?" You know, he was.
So making light of the situation. But I guess I'll ask Cindy as well as you about this before we get into the actual meat of the Syria discussion here. I wanted to ask you about the optics of hosting top Russian officials the day after you fire the head of the agency that's investigating the Russia collusion.
It was quite ironic. When was the last time the Washington Post and the New York Times ran a TASS picture on the front page of their newspapers? The White House was very late in releasing any pictures. They don't normally release pictures like that promptly, but the Russian news agency, the Russians had a photographer in the Oval Office and were quick to put out pictures not only of Lavrov with Trump, but with Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador, who is one of the central figures in this Russia collusion story. He's said to have close ties to the Russian intelligence agencies. And in the pictures that the White House released, he wasn't in those.
Cindy, I want to get you into this conversation because it's rather interesting. The White House apparently tweeted that the Russians tricked us. I mean, how does that look to the rest of the world when Russia posts these pictures and American reporters are not even allowed inside that meeting? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree, Mill, that the optics were just terrible coming one day after the firing of the man who was in charge of the investigation about the Trump campaign possibly colluding with Russia to interfere in the U.S. elections.
Right.
So, and then you know, Lavrov being in the office, meeting with the president, who is, of course, a pay grade higher than the Russian foreign minister. And then, as Pete said, Ambassador Kislyak, who that basically that's one of the reasons that National Security Advisor Michael Flynn was fired because of his telephone conversations with Kislyak, and then the body language of the Trump's just beaming from ear to ear and Kislyak laughing, and the sort of the good humor that we saw in the photos as compared to President Trump meeting with German Chancellor Angela Merkel and refusing to do a handshake.
Right.
I mean, I think it was a lot of people were taken aback by those images.
That's sweet irony. But just 1 month ago, Cindy, the president actually described relations with Russia being at an all-time low. What's changed? They seem to be getting along just fine.
Yes, and these frequent meetings, and as we said, Lavrov going to the State Department for the first time, I believe, since 2013, or being in Washington for the first time since 2013. And it seems like they really want to get back to a point of frequent dialogue. They're trying to work out things on Syria, and the Trump administration has made this a priority.
Okay. We're running out of time already. What's happening with Syria? Well, that's what the meat of the discussion was, right?
Syria was ostensibly the #1 item on the agenda, and the idea is to create safe zones. So that people
to help the civilians.
Exactly, the civilians.
Are they in agreement on that regard?
They're in agreement in general, but the details are still quite soft. A
lot of things still to work out. And Cindy, I apologize. I know you're in Fairbanks, Alaska, to cover an Arctic Council meeting with 8 countries there. We're just going to have to rely on your report, which is probably coming out in a few hours. So thank you so much for joining us, Cindy. Thank you, Pete Heinlein.
Time goes by so fast.
Time goes by so quick.